we've got a 96-year-old guy in Brooklyn. Most of his retirement income comes from a rental property. He hasn't been able to collect rent in over 3 years. You might say, well, the pandemic was only 2020, right? Well, he started this eviction process to get this jerkball out of his unit in 2019. And the pandemic hit, and he's just hosed. He is hosed. That's what we're talking about. He can't get the tenant out. He's like ball boxed in. This is terrible. 96 years old. At that point in time, every day that you're alive is a bonus. You shouldn't be spending time worrying about some knuckleheaded tenant who just chooses not to pay rent because they don't really need to, because there are eviction processes in place that are non-eviction at this point. The eviction moratorium. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the continuation of policies that should have never been enacted. Eviction moratorium? No. You got to figure it out, because otherwise it ends up like this, and it's caused more damage to the marketplace than it's created, safety measures for those who can't pay. 96-year-old Brooklyn landlord can't evict tenant who hasn't paid rent in almost 3 years. New York, for months, CBS 2 has been reporting on landlords of smaller properties. Mom and pop landlords. That's what we always call them, right? They own a couple of properties. And I used to cover this a lot with Summit Properties Northwest and Seattle Real Estate Podcast until we kind of got into some other storylines, and we call it News for Reasonable People. So the eviction moratorium is one of those huge things where I basically said, you're going to see rent skyrocket because you're going to have a lot of landlords dealing with nonsense like this, and they're not going to want to do that. They're going to cash out. They're going to cash out of those properties. They're not going to buy another rental unit in these areas where you've got these moratoriums going on. And that's very true in Seattle. Seattle's got some of the highest rents around, and their rent is skyrocketing, and everybody is like, how did this happen? Why is this happening to our marketplace? Let's blame the evil landlords. A lot of it has to do with policy created by Seattle City Council, because they don't really understand business. They just flat don't. They don't understand economics or business. They want to look at anybody who owns property as the man and say, corporate landlords, they're the worst. They're the worst. We need to protect our tenants' rights. How's that working out for you there in Seattle? The problem was exacerbated by the pandemic. Monday's CBS 2's Natalie Duddridge spoke with an elderly gentleman who still can't evict, even though the eviction moratorium was lifted months ago. I'm recording this for you in July of 2022. When were the eviction moratoriums? I can't even remember here in Washington when those were lifted. It's been a long, long time, right? Remember when we had that knucklehead in Congress sleeping on the steps of the Capitol in D.C., and she was really getting after the eviction moratorium. We need to keep this on for years and years and years, because we've got 11 million Americans that are going to be evicted if you release these moratoriums, if you sunset the moratoriums. Did you hear about 11 million Americans getting evicted? That's funny, because I didn't either. So what happened? People figured it out, right? People figured it out. And one of the major reasons the eviction moratorium should have never been put in place is because you should have never shut down the economy. You should have never told specific businesses, yep, you got to shut your business down. Oh, no, you're good. You're big, massive. You're Costco. Of course we need you. You're still open. You, small little mom and pop store. Oh, no, you're done. 7-Eleven, little wannabe 7-Eleven. Nope, you're done. No go. Restaurants, no go. Should have never done that. It just should have been a no-go. And what I find so interesting is how many people I talk to now, and they're talking like I did at the beginning of the pandemic, which is, you know what? If you want to get vaccinated, that's fine. Or at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have vaccines. And it was like, you just took your lumps and you took your lumps and you did your thing and you did your best to not get it. That is exactly what's happening right now. Difference is we've got the vaccine, whether you want to believe that's positive or negative. But so many people are like, yeah, I got the Rona. But, I'm 45 times vaxxed and I got 13 booster shots and it's all good. It's kind of like, it's how we were saying, well, it's, the flu, it's a bad case of the flu, and it could be worse if you're not vaccinated. Some are led to believe. I got vaxxed and I kind of think I got it because of that. Yeah. That's just what I think. Probably not, but yeah, I don't know. It just seemed really coincidental. Yeah, I get the jab and then, oh, hey, yeah, got the Rona. I dodged it for 2.5 years and then all of a sudden end up with it. But everybody's traveling now. Oh, it's okay. All my other friends with similar beliefs, they're traveling too. So I guess it's all right. I guess we all go out and then they get the Rona. I mean, it's unavoidable, right? If you want to live a life, it's unavoidable. Kind of like how we talked about at the beginning of the effing pandemic. There's that. I see more and more people wearing masks in stores. All right. If you want to do you do me. I'm going to go get my milk and whatever it is. Probably not going to wear a mask. Yeah, it's me. I know I'm a big jerk. That's how I roll. It's disrupting my family and everything else. It's a nightmare, this 96-year-old landlord says. We first interviewed Pantano early in 2021. The 96-year-old landlord said his tenant had not paid rent since September of 2019. So you got Q4 of 2019, all of 2020, all of 2021, most of first 3 quarters of 2022. That's a long time, especially for a guy who's in his now he's heading into his upper 90s. If you're at that point in life, you just want to live your life. I think I would have been tempted to sell that bad boy. Because literally at 96, what is your life expectancy? For me, I will have outlived it by 96 if I get there. Don't think I will. I just don't think I'll get there. And do I want to get there? That's another question. I don't know. I guess at 96, you're like, hell yeah, I want to keep living. All right. How's the quality of life? This guy's quality of life sucks because somebody put an eviction moratorium in place and he is hosed. I've spent $130,000. I cannot afford to keep this man on this property. Well, so far you have, unfortunately, and that's what the system looks at. Well, you guys are going to have to work that out. And clearly his tenant is gaming the system. Pantano said 80% of his retirement income comes from the 2-bedroom condo on Benson Avenue in Brooklyn. He bought it in 1984. So what's he getting for rent? Is he getting 2-bedroom condo in Brooklyn? Is that $2,000 a month? I have no idea what rent is like in Brooklyn. Is it $2,500? Is it $3,000? Is it $1,500? I don't know, but any which way, it's got to be somewhere in that range, right? It's got to be somewhere in that range. Over 3? No, I don't know Brooklyn rents very well, but I'm totally guessing there. Manhattan, different story, right? Different story. But Brooklyn, okay. And I know Brooklyn's come around, and I know Brooklyn's gotten more and more expensive. That's why I'm just babbling, kind of telling you what I think, as usual. So you're not talking about a ton of money, but 80% of that is what this guy lives on. So, and he's pumping money instead of getting money out of that property, disposable income. He is pumping money into it, $130,000. And that's where all of these politicians who threw out these eviction moratoriums just willy-nilly like candy at a parade, they don't really understand the complexities of, okay, if you hammer on a certain segment of home ownership, they're going to respond. And they're going to respond like this guy and say, hey, I can't do anything with them. And people are going to be really turned off to owning properties like this and renting them out. And so you take that pool, you shrink it, and you've already got a massive shortage of housing across the U.S. You'll continue to see article after article after article. We've had a massive shortage of housing. We haven't built enough. And you've got corporations jumping in and buying up the marketplace because it makes sense. They're getting really good return. And people with a lot of capital, they make more capital by investing, and they're buying homes. And so people are saying, well, they're pricing us out of the market. Well, there's a whole bunch of factors that are literally pricing, people out of the market. But landlords are especially, they're like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. I'm not going to buy in that city because they, did the eviction moratorium. And I don't really want to be exposed to that down the road. We get another variant of the pandemic and something else comes up. Let's shut her down. Landlords don't want to deal with that. They want to know consistently what their, cash flow is going to be. And if you get shut down and tell a certain segment, okay, you guys don't have to pay rent, but you guys do have to pay your mortgages. Wildly unfair. And I don't think you're going to see that. I don't think you would see that after these next midterm elections. There would be a hard no-go on some of that stuff. Whereas with the beginning of this pandemic and after the 2020 election, yeah, right? The moratorium was lifted in January of 2022, but now he's facing another hurdle. The only thing that's holding it up, it seems, is the ERAP. And that stands for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Most cities have this in place. And there was a big push to, get all the funds into the landlord and the tenant's hands. And that was a debacle, just city after city. Some cities handled it well. Some cities had the ability to get the money from federal government to local government into the hands of the landlords that are owed it. Others, not so much. So, it's a bureaucratic nightmare. And you got poor 96-year-old guy who, should be running around with his victory flag for just living that long. Instead, he's like, I got to deal with the ERAP. They got a loophole in there. Even if a decision is made on ERAP, that automatically stops the case, 𝐏𝐸 said. So people on the tenant side are playing all sorts of games to delay. And in the meantime, they ain't paying rent. So that's some real BS. That really is. So measures that were set up to keep people from getting kicked to the curb, which never happened in mass numbers. Eviction numbers have risen. But when you take a moratorium on said evictions and, pull it off, of course those numbers are going to go up. But not to the point where you're seeing news stories on it, right? When's the last time you heard an eviction moratorium news story? Yeah, that's right. You haven't for a long time, but it's still out there and it's still going on. And it's because of decisions. We need to keep all the tenants safe. Well, how about don't shut down, the economy where those tenants are working? Keep everybody going. Take the people who are most vulnerable to COVID, set them aside, let them do their thing individually so they don't get it. Everybody else, you just kind of go because it's go time. I know that's an old school analysis and it's an old school thought process, but you don't shut down the economy. You don't put an eviction moratorium in place. These are like social justice measures. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, no, market doesn't react well to that. And it's not. You got rent skyrocketing and you've got inflation at 9.1% is the most recent thing. You've got the Federal Reserve, talking about doing a 1-point bump, 100 basis points. It'd be the biggest bump ever. I think you'll see that because after 9.1, which is more than 8.6 by a scooch, and those numbers are, ratcheted down to begin with. So what is the real inflation rate? 12, 13? Probably. I have no idea, but it's more. You're just not sure how much more. So there's an enormous backlog, Assemblyman Jeffrey 𝐑𝐞𝐻𝐸 said. Shocking. They've got 75,000 cases currently awaiting decisions, and they got to go through this system. 𝐑𝐞𝐻𝐸, one of ERAP's co-sponsors, acknowledged the program is far from perfect. How'd you do today? Well, yeah, my day was far from perfect. It wasn't perfect at all. Our system is far from perfect. It's one way to put it. It's one way to couch it nicely in there, right? We went to great lengths to try and protect tenants from eviction. Why was that? So many spam calls. Crazy. What was up with that? Is that whole socialist deal? And the people at the Capitol, they're bad. So only cover the workers of the world unite. Kind of feels that way, right? We also don't want landlords to be forced into horrible economic situations, 𝐍𝐞𝐚𝐬𝐸 said. Well, I would say that a 96-year-old dude who relies upon 80% of his income coming out of a property that hasn't been able to get any money for 3 years, I'd say that's a horrible economic situation. I mean, what's the guy living on? He's probably got savings, because here's a guy, he's probably paid this condo off. He bought it when, 84? That's a long time ago. I was a freshman in high school. He paid it off. He's responsible. He did his thing. But now he's having to pay for taxes. He's having to pay HOA dues for sure. You don't get a, HOA moratorium. So you got to pay taxes. You got to pay maintenance. You got to pay HOA dues. And that stuff is not cheap. He's paying for that out of pocket. So now he's going sideways, downward, not even sideways. He's going down. He's going negative for 3 years. These aren't his glory. These aren't his golden years. These are his golden years. You make it past 90, literally, you run around with a flag. You limp around with a flag, whatever it is you need to do at that age. Because, yeah, I mean, I've already got so many injuries that I'm kind of like, oh, just from life and being in the gym and, sports and all that. And you're like, when you're 18 and you take an injury and you're like, I'll just, just get rid of it. It'll be fine. And then you're 53 and you're like, God, why did I do that? What was I thinking there? That's not good. At 96, how do you think that injury is going to feel? Oh, yeah, I really shouldn't have done that. Back in what year was that? I mean, like 80 years later, right? Oh, that was a brutal injury. Nah, if you've made it to 96, you take a victory lap every single day you wake up and you go, oh, still here? I'm killing it. If a landlord accepts payment from ERAP, the tenant cannot be evicted for the next 12 months. What kind of policy is that? Kick that guy out. I don't care. At this point in time, kick the mofo out. I'm at wit's end, Pantano said. At this point, housing attorneys say landlords are left with few options. You got number one, wait for the courts. That's working out well for this guy, right? Okay. Sell the property at a loss or sue. Well, you're not necessarily selling it at a loss, right? You might have to take a discount because you got a tenant in there, something along those lines. But here in Washington, one of two ways that you can, get the tenant out is you say you're going to sell it or you physically move back into it yourself. So property at a loss or sue. Yep, you could sue. How well is that going to work out in court systems like here in Washington State? Not well. And, suing is a potentially expensive and lengthy process. You're just going to go into this thing where it could be years down the road, could be a couple of years down the road with the way the courts are backed up. We already talked about 75,000 cases, and that's just in the ERAP program, right? We reached out to Pantano's tenants and the tenant's attorney, but did not receive a call back before this story was published. They said nothing because mum's the word. They are conning the system, right? Because the economy, jobs are going. If you can't get a job in this market, what are you even doing? So you can't do that argument at all anymore. So what have you got to rely on? Well, it's the law. It's the law. Eviction moratorium. It's the law. Yeah. You can't kick me out. Now, people are gaming the system. They are. They know it. We all know it. And that's what they're doing. And that's why policies like this should have never been put in place. But they did. And this is one of those, yeah, we talked about that and it happened. Is this shocking? Not to you guys, because we've been talking about it for a while. So here you are. This poor 96-year-old guy, he needs a GoFundMe, right? Doesn't he? He needs a GoFundMe for just being alive. I think that's what we should do. GoFundMe. Dude, you made it to 96. That tenant, they should have 100 lashes with a wet noodle, right? I don't know what the appropriate measure is for somebody who games a system like that. I guess they have to live with the knowledge that they've, created a nightmare for this 96-year-old dude. Crazy. I think my grandma died when she was 93. That's a long life. That's a long life. And to be dealing with this nonsense at that point, hard no-go. All right. So GoFundMe for the old dude in Brooklyn. How about that? That's what I'm going to leave you with. Thanks so much for being here. We'll catch up soon. Talk then. Bye for now.